Hello, this is Citizens Going Wild, Thinking for Yourself in an Age of Hype and Glory. And I'm the person who's talking, George. I was going to start about one thing, but then now I decided I'm going to start about another thing because the people have cried out for me to straighten things out. There's a essay in the Wall Street Journal today by a wonderful professor, Dr. Ellis, professor at German literature at the University of California, Santa Cruz, and the author of a book, The Breakdown of Higher Education. He sounds kind of depressed, and he should be. Basically, his article laments the current state of the ideological campus in America. And it is an ideological campus run by people who think they're woke, special, and really don't care about what the rest of the American people say because they have tenure. Uh, there is a way, I believe, to instantly change things in different states around the country. Right now, the woke people, the people who think that America is the source of evil in the world, the professors who think that white people in particular, white Americans in particular, are the source of evil in the world. And they've sort of hijacked the whole darn place. And we sit around helpless as they endlessly berate us about our racism in general and our lack of wokeism, if there's such a word in general. There's an instant way to change this. Every college and university I know of has a core curriculum. These are the courses that everyone must take. What we can do is set up a non-ideological core curriculum, which will produce students who are more open-minded, who might disagree with some ideas of the woke folks. And this is how we'll do it. It's instantaneous. We just say there's an alternative curriculum. If you want to take it, you can. If you don't, you don't. Those who take it will be known as the harder workers, the scholars, the better students, and they will be much sought out by people in business, law, and perhaps even in graduate school. Columbia University has a Western civilization core, which basically takes you from the beginning of Western civilization up into modern times. And it's unique in that you basically learn from a professor who leads that part of the discussion wherever we are, let's say the Roman Empire. And you read from the original works of that time. You read literature, poetry, music, if there is any at that time. And I would say you would have to write a 250-page essay each and every week. And this would go on during every semester that you are in college. It's a lot of writing. I know that. But by the end, you will know, and the future employer will know, and graduate schools will know that you know how to write. And you can read with a critical eye, an objective critical eye, and that you considered all sides of whatever issue we're dealing with. And then you can write well, clearly, and concisely. That's not a bad advertisement for someone who wants to get hired by someone else. In addition, all the students in this area will take a course that will leave them with an EMT, emergency medical technician certificate. And this is important because it's basically a way to pay back the people who've been subsidizing your education, either the complete stranger or your long-suffering parents. And you will be available, and they will know that if they fall down somewhere outside their home, for example, you will be there to administer first aid. And if they have a stroke, you will be there and you will know this person has to go to the hospital immediately and get a certain shot which will break up the clot and restore this person to his former self. Also, when there's a big disaster somewhere in the world, a hurricane, a flood, or whatever, you can go somewhere and actually be of use. Not only look like you're of use, but actually do something. I think it will give you a great deal of confidence. It also might even lead to a career if you want to be an EMT for a longer period of time or you can't find other work. But mainly it's a way of you paying back the people who've been paying for you all of this time. I think the combination of guaranteeing that the people have specific skills, specific liberal arts skills in an age of science and technology will bolster the confidence of the long-suffering parents, the students, and other people who are just strangers but have contributed to your welfare. And that is my wonderful idea. Oh, by the way, the main objection to this idea is generally that, well, how do you know you won't get the same woke professors, the same people who are bigoted against the United States and Western civilization? And the answer is all the people in this program will be part-time instructors, which will lead to lower costs for the university. And it will guarantee that they stick to the straight and narrow. That is, if they come out as ideological, they just won't be hired the next semester. There's actually an organization, the National Association of Scholars, that could pretty much guarantee that 99.9% of the people they recommend will be reasonable, objective, and sane, which would be a vast improvement. And so there's no need to put up anymore with people like us paying other people to spit in their faces and insulting the things that we hold dear, such as this country. I wanted to go back to current events here. And one of the problems connected to colleges and universities, I suppose, is that the colleges and universities have become ideological. And now K through 12 is becoming ideological. The ideology is that intellectuals should rule the world because they're smarter, wiser, and have better hearts. Ha, ha, ha. The one example of trying to change the perception of America is something called the 619 Project. This is basically a project of the New York Times with its leftist views of the whole world. And they put out a long series of essays that would amount to kind of a medium-sized book. And they basically say that the United States started with slavery in 1619. I believe 3 slaves came to America that year. And that the origins of the United States have continued to influence the United States. We started in sin, in slavery, and we continued onward. Now, I would say, first of all, the country really didn't get started until 1776. But nonetheless, the idea is that we were sinners then, and that this is kind of, slavery is kind of the original sin. And so far, we haven't done the work to get rid of that original sin. We still have a racist country, they would say. Well, there was a backlash against this bad history, a terrific backlash by liberals, conservatives, anarchists, and everyone else. Nonetheless, Biden looks as if he is going to provide grants to schools to start teaching this 619 Project. Once kids absorb this, and they will absorb this, we're in big trouble in this country because you'll have entire generations that basically distrust, dislike, perhaps hate the United States. I happen to think it's a pretty good place, but I certainly don't think, well, regardless of what you think, that we should be indoctrinating people. We shouldn't have to pay extra to be insulted. That's my point. I want to go on to something else now. Biden has, I like his idea, by the way, tremendously, of rebuilding the infrastructure. I just wish more of the money was going for infrastructure instead of ideological projects. He wants to spend money on improving rail traffic in the United States. And we're always being berated in this country that other countries have bullet trains that travels such and such speed and are clean and nice and fun. Okay. I don't know why, but intellectuals love trains. They don't get on them. They don't travel by them, but they love trains. And they like any sort of public transportation. I'm not sure why. I think they're worried that people are just going every which way, wherever they want to go. What is this, anarchy? They're not listening to me. At any rate, there are places where I think the railroads would do a great deal of good where there's dense population. But even there, you have to be careful. They won't be just wasting your money. In New Jersey, they have a rickety rail system, but it's a problem. Not only is it old and rickety and they don't always serve drinks, but in addition, it stops every 5 feet. So you kind of defeat the purpose of this sort of project. And I'm afraid that this will happen again with the railroads, stopping and stopping and stopping. And it's hard to stop that because various congressmen will, of course, vote to have it stop in their state, in their town. Here's another problem. First of all, we have railroads that do carry a lot of freight right now. Putting in a railroad does not necessarily create jobs. I mean, it'll create some jobs while you're driving whatever it is they drive through to the rail to keep it down, packed down. But anyway, the problem with jobs in rural areas and in cities as well is that the jobs have moved on. It's no good having a railroad unless you have something for the railroad to haul. If there's nothing to haul, it doesn't help. What you end up is kind of with a bigger and better sandbox. I want to help people who are in trouble economically, want a better job. Tremendous. I love to see that happen. But to see them prosper in the long run, you have to do something. You have to move maybe we should, instead of putting in more rails, we should just move people to where the jobs are. If they don't want to go, God bless, sit there in your poverty. But if you do want to go and get a job, we'll move you over there. We'll move the whole damn neighborhood over there. I don't care. It's money well spent. What is not money well spent is just assuming that transportation is the major problem. It is a minor, minor, minor problem. The problem is not getting to work or leaving work and going home. The problem is finding work. I hope we take cognizance of this idea as we go along. I always have to mention Israel a lot because I care a lot about Israel, and I think you should too. Here's a headline. Rights group accuses Israel of conducting apartheid state. The rights group that is accusing Israel is basically the United Nations, thoroughly discredited as being objective regarding Israel. They hate Israel and often pass resolutions against it. In fact, 1/3 of the resolutions at the UN are against Israel. You wouldn't think there'd be so many for such a small country, but they're there. At any rate, the way this whole thing is written, it basically acts as if they're objective when they are not. Rights group. What is this rights group? It's Human Rights Watch. Human Rights Watch used to be an important and objective observer of human rights around the world. It no longer is. It has its teeth out for Israel all the time. It has been thoroughly discredited. But the New York Times writes it straight, so you think that, Israel is doing something wrong again. Here's another problem that I also don't have an answer to. And here it is, the headline. Again, top city schools take very few students who are Black or Latino. This is a major problem. So far, we have not come up with any way to handle it. It used to be the way we decided where people got in life was to give them equal opportunity to get an education, which we've basically done in the country. You may not go to Harvard, but you go to a community college. And if you can handle that, you want to go to a regular college or university, you're most welcome. And we'll help you pay for it to boot. But there's still a problem. What do you do if some groups do much better than other groups? You only had to, when I was growing up, you only had to worry about blacks and whites. Now you have yellows and mauves. Here's the problem. There are elite schools throughout the nation. The way they become elite is by giving students a test, and you have to do well enough on the test to show you're intelligent enough to do well in that school. The problem is this. Some folks, some groups do better than others. No, it's not white folks. I think we've been spending too much time at the mall. People from Asia do remarkably well, incredibly well. They make up at least half of the population of these special schools. You may have heard of them. Stuyvesant School is one of them. There are others as well. At any rate, they use a test and nothing else to get someone in there. And basically, if you have the Asians taking up half the space, then white people about a third. There's not a lot left for, for African Americans and for Hispanic Americans as well. What do? There is a big fight going on, and it's a consequential fight, so you should pay some attention. There's a big fight going on in New York City. The people who benefit from these schools, the people who like the idea of excellence, are saying, look, give the test. If you do well, you get in. It's perfectly objective. We have not dealt with this problem, which is, this is the problem. We don't, on the one hand, we don't want to say that one group is not as smart as another group. On the other hand, what do? The test determines whether you get in or not. Should we go away from the test? Well, then we're not being objective. The reason we got the test in the first place was because of a lack of objectivity. People were admitted to college and into special schools based on how much money their father made or whether they were an important person or all sorts of baloney. Then tests came along and people said, aha, this is great, objectivity. Well, objectivity is popular as long as it gets the results that a lot of people want. And now it doesn't get the results that a lot of people want. Some folks do better than others. I would not have the nerve to say that, well, maybe Asians are smarter. But you know something? When we give tests around the world, and we've done it many times, the Asians tend to score higher than anyone else, followed by white folks and followed by people of color, I guess you would say. And they've taken out all of the specifics. No one has to know what a regatta is anymore. We've tried it every which way, and no matter what we do, we get the same results. Asians at the top, whites below them, and other folks below them. What do? This is the nature of a capitalist system. This is the nature of a merit-based system. This is the nature of what is China doing now. I can guarantee there's no affirmative action in China. Whoever is the best gets in and becomes the engineer, the computer expert, whatever. And those that don't, well, it's too bad. You didn't score high enough. So we have to deal with that. I have no idea how to deal with that sort of thing. There was a picture in the New York Times a while back, two pictures. One was Stuyvesant High School, the class of whatever it was, and it was white, and I would say maybe 20% were black. That's a rough count. Nowadays, you look at it and you can count the small number of black students. What do we do? What do we do? I don't know. I don't know. We're wrestling with this across the country. In Texas, they they tried this. The top 15% of every high school class automatically gets to go to the University of Texas, which is their prestige university. Maybe we should do something like that. Whoever's in the top, I don't know, 5% or 2%, 3% of any high school gets to go. I don't know what you do with this. It's an impossible situation. And it's one of the problems the multicultural societies wrestle with all the time. I was trying to straighten out my files, an impossible task, and it really would be best for me and my family if I gave up on it. But I happened to come across this Time magazine from 2010. What a title. Why Israel Doesn't Care About Peace. Why Israel Doesn't Care About Peace. Have you ever heard this said about any other nation in the history of the world or in the history of our current world? You just slander an entire country by saying they don't care about peace. There's no evidence of that, by the way. They care about peace like crazy. It's a very small country. When someone gets killed in Israel, thousands of people know who that person is. It's the size of New Jersey. That's it. I don't know of any group of people that care more about who dies than the Israelis. When you see these pictures on television of different folks who have died fighting in Iraq, fighting in Syria, fighting in Afghanistan, how many of these people do you know? Think of what it would be like if every time they showed a picture of someone, you say, oh yeah, that's my cousin's son. That's my aunt's son. That's the guy, oh yeah, I used to play baseball or soccer with him. They care like crazy. But what a slander. What a slander. I don't think anyone would slander any other country like that. In fact, have you ever seen a headline that says why Ireland doesn't care about peace, why China doesn't care about peace, why anyone? You can only get away with this slanderous crap when you're talking about Jews. All right. I don't know if you saw this. I think I might have mentioned it, but some things are just worth mentioning more than once. Here's what I would call fake news, in that it is in the New York Times, but it wasn't in the CNN, CNBC, or ABC, CBS, and CBS. $2.1 billion for undocumented immigrants. If you wanted to know why people would want to come to a land such as America, look at this. You're in the country illegally. Not only don't we make you leave, and not an unreasonable approach, I would say, but we are going to give you cash money. And by the way, while you're here, we will educate your children, which will cost in New Jersey $18,000 per student. But no. You'll likely be in the poor districts because you don't have a lot of money when you come here. And you will get $28,000 per student, per child spent on you. When you become a citizen, you'll be privileged. You will get the benefits of affirmative action, which are mighty big nowadays. You'll be hired by large companies with great benefits. You'll be able to get into schools, colleges, whatever, with lower grades than the white person whose father died fighting for this country. and you'll basically have an easier time in life. I mean, from time to time, someone might make a snide remark or a bigoted remark, but you can shake it off. Um, One thing that is fake news that drives me nuts is that people don't realize that during World War II, the Muslims were very, very heavily tilted towards supporting Adolf Hitler and the Nazis. In fact, they raised tens of thousands of soldiers who went and fought with the Germans. In addition, they were led by a guy named Amin al-Husseini, who was so enthusiastic about murdering Jews. He knew Hitler. He had audiences with Hitler many times. And actually, he urged Hitler to get going here and finish up the European Jews and come to the Middle East and murder the Jews there. This is a picture of al-Husseini at a concentration camp. Not 1 in 10 million Americans have seen it. It's not their fault, but well, it's not their fault. I'll leave it at that sort of thing. Here's something else you don't see very often. In fact, you've never seen this. What's the name of the guy who funded 4,978 schools for black people, real schools with classrooms and blackboards and chalk and teachers yelling at bad students, the whole thing? That's a lot of schools, don't you think? He basically devoted his life, after he made his fortune, to spending his fortune to helping black students, black young people. And a lot of people benefited here. It's a guy named Julius Rosenwald. Ever hear of him? No. But because you listen to this podcast, you know about him. Julius Rosenwald, who led the Sears and Roebuck Company for 30 years. Then he retired and he devoted his entire life to helping black people. I've never heard a single thank you from black people that got in the news. Okay. 4,978 schools for black children across 15 southern and border states. That is also fake news, something that you just don't mention, and I think you should. I do. I also think that black students on college campuses should try and help out a little bit more than they do. Here's more fake news. It abounds. Maybe not the fake news that Trump is thinking of, but fake nonetheless. How many of you have seen the Islamic State executing another Christian? They do it constantly, by the way. Here's a picture. I doubt if you can make it out from this. But the point is that this horrible thing is going on here, and yet the mainstream media doesn't mention it. Doesn't mention it. It doesn't mention it. It doesn't mention it. Here's something to amuse yourself in the nice weather that's coming around now. They had an election at the Women's Rights Agency of the United Nations, Women's Rights. And guess who? Who was elected? Well, this guy who's from Iran, where they treat women like donkeys. I think that's enough good news for today. I think I'll just stop right there. And just keep your eye out for fake news. Although I don't know how you would keep your eye out. Sometimes Fox News does cover these stories. But basically, you'd be better off just tuning into this podcast. I do the work so you can relax and absorb the information. Thank you for coming by, and I hope to see you next week.